Today I get to talk with Courtney Watkins, who's actually a swing trader who's looking to get into day trading. She's had an interesting background to get to trading, as so many, right, have such diverse backgrounds. While I forget where she's actually living at the beginning of the interview, we have a great conversation. She's a wonderful, wonderful lady and a great trader. So it's a good conversation. I hope you enjoy the podcast. Thanks for joining us here at A Talk with Traders. Welcome back, everyone, to A Talk with Traders. I'm very happy today to have with me from the beautiful, I assume you're in beautiful Starkville, Mississippi, but
No,
oh, you're not. That's right, because you had moved. Well, I have Courtney with me anyways, and Courtney is in Colorado then, is that right?
that's correct.
There you go. All right, I'll get it straight. So, well, you know what? Why don't we start there, Courtney? Because you had an interesting sort of life journey to lead you to trading. From what I understand, you started training as a professional photographer, but ended up doing something a little bit different. Why don't you explain sort of what you're doing? Because I thought it was fascinating.
Okay, my undergrad's in fine art, and I went to Portfolio Center to study commercial photography. And while I was there, I really just fell in love with being more into the support crew, into the support part of production. And I became a stylist, a photo stylist. And from there, after I left Portfolio Center, I started freelancing and assisting, and then worked my way up to key wardrobe and costume departments for larger commercials.
So, what does a photo stylist do?
So I basically would get all of the props and wardrobe, talk with art direction or the director or photographer, and put together all of the pieces, like dress the talent, or if there was um, I usually would only do hand props, like small props,
Okay,
and put everything together. So a lot of
cool.
shopping, a lot of budgeting, a lot of dealing with clients and um, directors and photographers, and just making everything kind of come together to put it on set.
Right. So, I
Yeah,
mean, a natural transition then into trading, of course. So,
of course, it makes so much sense.
well, it's always amazing to me how different everybody's background is, right? We all come from having done something different and ended up, trading through different avenues. Now, in your case, as you said, you were doing this professionally.
Right.
I got your location wrong because you had actually were in Mississippi, but then I thought this was fascinating. You renovated a house for ever, it seemed, and then
Mhm.
decided to sell it.
Yeah, I'm from Mississippi, born and raised in Mississippi, and then moved to Atlanta in my 20s. And that's where I finished undergrad and went to Portfolio Center. And along the way, I met Jeff, and Jeff is a great, great man and very talented carpenter. So we decided to uh, buy a house and renovate it, and we lived in it and worked on it whenever we had free time around work, which was that's why it took 12 years.
Yeah, when I say forever, I mean I'm not kidding. Like 12 years is a long time to
Totally.
be renovating a house. So,
Yeah, yeah. But we did it with money we had in our pockets and with the free time that we had available.
yeah.
And in the summer of 19, I don't know, I started worrying that it was about time for a recession, some kind of economic downturn, and decided to, maybe we should just talk to a realtor and see, because we hadn't had it appraised or anything since we've been renovating, and we've done a ton of work on it.
I
When we
bet.
bought it, it was like a 3-1, and when we left, it was a 3-4, no, 3-3.5 with a full basement. Like, we finished out the basement so I could have my studio down there, and Jeff had a small workshop. Um, and we did well when we talked to the realtor, and they decided, or she told us, like, we could sell this house and with no issues, and ended up selling it to the first couple that walked through before it even hit the market.
Wow.
Sold for over asking, and we decided to make a big change because we don't have kids, and why not? And Jeff lived out here before and he loved it.
Right.
And so we downsized from a 3,000 square foot house to 1,200 square feet. and moved to Colorado in October. And then COVID hit.
Yeah. So, yeah, let's talk about that because that's what's affected so many people. So, COVID hit. You're already worried about an economic recession in
Yeah.
which affects your industry, as you said. But then that, I guess that just put sort of the nail in the coffin. You were sort of saying how not only did it reduce the number of jobs, but the available jobs essentially were putting you at risk, it sounded like.
Yeah, and these weren't from production companies and producers that I've worked with before, but I was getting calls for jobs that they were wanting to put me in, me and the talent. It wasn't just me, like 30 talent in a hotel room to do a fitting, like a wardrobe fitting with all of these people, and and then just like zoom in to the clients and to the agency production company. And I couldn't, I just did not feel right doing that. I didn't think it was safe. And I told them no. I told a couple of productions no.
Yeah.
And I couldn't, before COVID hit, I was flying like back to Atlanta. I'd work on Turner Classic Movies or go, wherever, go out of town, wherever folks needed me. But, no flying with COVID.
Yeah.
And then like a lot of the jobs, like I said, out here, they were very risky. And so I just decided that I could either, what do I do after COVID hit? Should I kind of take this time to learn how to be truly financially independent? Or do I just sit and wait for the, COVID to blow over and
Right.
go
Right.
back to that? So
Well,
I've been knuckling down and trying to learn, and
well,
yeah.
let's talk about that in that transition. Before we do, any names you can drop on people you worked with? I'm just curious.
I've worked with Shaq. I think I talked about this a
Oh
little
yeah.
bit in the chat. I worked with Shaq, Barkley. Let's see, Eddie Gaffigi. I'm not sure if you know him. He was in Twilight.
Okay.
Joan Jett.
Oh
She had
yeah.
her own people, but it was a production with Joan Jett and Carrie Underwood. That was pretty cool. She was amazing. Um,
That's cool. Excellent. Well, that's very cool. All right. So to trading then. I understand that you had picked up Brian's book, how to swing trade, and that
Did.
sort of helped you on the journey. And when you got started, you actually didn't even tell Jeff that you were sort of embarking on this using some of those hard-earned funds you were talking about. So tell me about that.
Yeah, so of course Jeff had no problems finding a job out here. He's very talented. So he was going to work, and I would be in front of the computer, come home at the end of the day, and I was still in front of the computer. And I didn't want to tell him what was going on until I knew I was capable of doing this. And so he would ask me, like, well, babe, what'd you do today? And I'd shrug it off kind of sheepishly. And then finally, like, so that was late summer when I started swing trading. And then finally in October, I told him that I told him what I'd been doing and that I thought I could make this work, that I could make it happen. And he was, oh, all right, babe, sure, whatever you say, kind of blew it off. And then I told him how much I had made. And he was like, well, that's,
A
oh, thank you.
little more interested now, right?
Oh,
Oh,
he,
you made that much.
he became very interested,
Good.
and he immediately was like, well, babe, whatever you need, like if you need to get a new computer set up, because I know you've been saying that, because I'm all Mac, like all creative fields are all
Right.
Apple products. So the PC thing is a completely new horizon for me. So he was saying like, yeah, whatever computer you need, whatever you think will help you. I really think this is a great idea. You should pursue it. So he was on board after that. Yeah.
Excellent.
I just didn't want to tell anybody. I didn't even tell my family. I'd asked my brother for some advice, but I didn't want to tell anyone until I was profitable.
Yeah, and you know that's something that affects a lot of people when they're getting into trading because almost everybody, I always say trading is like teaching or banking in a certain way that everybody's got a story, right? Good or bad, because we've all had interactions with it one way or another. Trading, it's often the, you know what, I had a cousin of a brother's uncle's pet groomer's friend who lost everything trading. Don't do it. Or you get the other story, right, where you know my uncle's cousin's second niece, you know, they put $5 into this stock and now they're a trillionaire.
Right. Yeah.
And like neither one, of course, are realistic to what we generally do. Why in your case though were you hesitant about telling people?
Probably because it felt so different from what I've been doing for the past 20 years.
Sure.
You know, going from being on sets and surrounded by people and doing all of these things with production to getting involved in trading. It was just a big reach. But the more I think about it, there are a lot of there are a lot of similarities. There's a
Mhm.
lot of research and budgeting and trying to find, and actually what really got me into it was the idea of value investing, and that brought me to swing trading and then to day trading. The idea of trying to buy a dollar for 50 cents, that just makes a lot of sense to me. And
Sure.
I went down that path first, like
Yeah.
learning as much as I could about value investing. And then it segued to swing trading.
Well, I mean, it's hard to argue with Mr. Buffett when you look at his success over the last 50 years.
50 years.
Yeah, I mean, there's been a lot of demonstration of why value investing works in this market. Though you're right. Like if you've started in the last couple of years, it can be tough though because we are in an inflated market that just continually rides at the top end of that spectrum, which means the values are fewer and far between. Your differential, like you said, trying to buy a buck for 50 cents is great when you have a highly depressed market, but when you're trying to buy a buck for 90 cents, right, it gets more
Yeah.
difficult to determine which equations work, if you will, and which ones are not likely to work
Right.
out. So
Right.
so
And
so
that's
ex-
exactly what sent me down swing trading, is
right.
because it was difficult. And when if
Mhm.
you did find something, you could end up being in a value trap, and it was just a bad investment. So yeah.
So, do you find that swing trading for you is that balance between the value investing and the short term? What we typically think of day trading is you're in and out in a matter of seconds, minutes, or hours, all within the day. Whereas a swing trade could be anywhere from a simple overnight, which is really a few hours, but with a market
Right.
closure, or up to a couple of weeks. Are you sort of attracted because that sort of gives you some fundamental, but with technical support?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. I think I like a balance between the two. I don't think I don't have the background to really be hardcore into fundamental analysis.
Hmm.
The more I learned all of these formulas and then comparing them with what everything else that was out there, I was just a bit deeper than I can go. That I could spend all of this time trying to learn these formulas, and then within one news report, it kind of gets turned upside down,
Yeah.
and things drop. So it doesn't. It really made me shift my approach.
Besides,
Definitely.
corporate financial statements aren't the most stimulating reading,
Oh my
in
gosh,
my opinion.
it's really it's awful.
Yeah, it can be tough, especially if you're just coming into it and you have to start to read them. I don't know that I've ever read one front to back. I have certainly flipped through a lot of them, and you sort of try and find the highlights. But yeah, it's a lot of work if you're a true fundamental. You're going to get into the company, understand how it functions. Anyways, that's
And I am not there. I am not that person.
right, right.
And so I've even found that just using median analyst price targets was better, because it seems like the markets move more around those median price targets than anything that I could come up with.
Right.
Or, so it's just better to stay in an average range. And I do still try to keep like a 15% margin of safety, just a little cushion in there.
So let's dig a little deeper into your approach. How would you describe your strategy? So on a swing trade basis, what do you look for? do you have sort of a couple of different strategies that you would say that you employ, or just one main one?
So it's really looking for good companies that are undervalued. Like I said before, I'm using like median price targets. I may reference a few websites just to see what their valuations have put on the stocks, and then looking at, and I'm really bad. I get a little excited. Often I'll enter a trade too early and it goes down before it comes back up. But I try to enter in that value zone between the 20 and 50 moving average.
Okay. On a daily basis? On a daily chart?
On the daily chart.
On the daily chart, yeah.
Yeah, I used to look a lot more closely at weekly and then daily, but now it seems to be going daily and lower.
Right.
Yeah.
And do you find... Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Do you tend to find yourself sliding more towards the shorter term trades now, or what's happening?
So I'm trying. I'm really trying. And March was pretty brutal. But I think I know a lot of it has to do with my psychology. I can get very impulsive. I want to jump into trades that I think may work, and I need to just slow my roll
Right.
and take the time to do a little bit more analysis. It's really difficult for me to trade strictly on technical analysis. Like, I'm definitely not a scalper.
Right.
But I have had some success with orbs, and I've really been working on reversals lately. I haven't been big into shorts, but I'm trying. Like doing reversals with a bearish divergence. Pretty simple, very basic, old school method. I was trying to do pivot points, and I ended up just scrapping the entire pivot point process off my charts, and went back to more fundamentals, like just taking the time and using different time frames to draw my own levels. And
Right.
that's made a huge difference. It's made a huge difference. And just taking the time, like as the chart progresses through today, to make again, like make my own levels on the chart instead of rely. I think I was using pivots as a crutch, basically.
And that's interesting because everybody has to find their own strategy, right? What works for you, and pivots are one thing that we've talked a lot about because some of our moderators and traders at Bear Bull Traders use it a lot. But it doesn't mean it's right for everybody. It's a technical indicator that provides value to some, and to others, you're right, it can just be a distraction to the chart. So I love, Courtney, that you tried it. All right, it's always good to, like, I'll look at it. You investigated it, you gave it a shot, and you said, look, it doesn't feel right? It's not working for you, so you went back to a strategy that works. Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, I spent a solid month really deep into the pivots, trying to figure out how to make them work on a daily, doing different like 2-day pivot relationships, which I found really interesting, and sometimes it worked. But then once the market got really volatile, everything just went off the rails, and I just decided to slow it down and go back to basics, and that's helped. That's helped a lot. I actually have been going back and rereading some of the first books that I read that got me into swing trading, and that's been helpful too.
Oh yeah. So we talked about Brian's book. What other books did you find were helpful in your journey?
The New Trading for a Living, Alexander Elder.
Okay.
Yeah, this is good. And I used to actually use his trade bills. I know everyone kind of giggled at Brian. I think it may have been Andrew that was laughing at Brian because he always has like the notebook with all of his handwritten notes.
Sure.
That's me to a T. I'll make a trade bill or a checklist, and I was doing that when I was only swing trading, and I really liked it. I think it helped keep me focused.
There's nothing wrong with that. I've got my book here that's got notes from today on it, and I make hand notes. There's nothing wrong with combining the technology with some good old-fashioned wrist effort. Write it
Yeah,
down. And I find that I remember things easier when I write it down compared to when I type. When it's like type and forget.
yeah,
When I'm forced to write it down, it has a more indelible impression, I find, on myself.
exactly. I feel exactly the same way. So I may even get back to trade bills,
Mm,
making that little handwritten sheet where I can check off everything and make sure I'm doing all of the things
right.
before I jump in.
So you had used in the past a like a checklist. It sounds like that you had sort of put down all the things you would look for before you made a trade decision.
Yes, yeah. And it would have a way that I could rate it
Right.
from a zero. It was basically how how Elder did his
Right.
trade bills, where you can rate each trade, and if it's not above like a 4 or 5, you don't take the trade.
Right.
Um, and I stopped doing it because I felt like it took too much time. And
Yeah.
now I'm forcing myself to slow down.
Right.
And I think it's a good way to make me slow down. So I
Yeah.
think I'm returning to that.
Good. I think there's a huge value in using those checklists and being more explicit about the trade decisions you make, because all too often, I often talk to day traders in this podcast and elsewhere, of course. And, one of the big issue people have is over trading, because we tend to we like the action. You want the excitement. You want to jump in. You're willing to follow your gut. The gut can be misleading, right? Your gut can be great when it's processing data you haven't brought forth to your consciousness and it's making a conclusion. Unfortunately, it's tough to know the difference between that and when your gut is filling in the gaps with hope and desire, right? And because you're like, I really want this to work, so my gut is telling me it's going to work, when really you're just sort of hoping it's going to work.
Right. Absolutely. And I um, get competitive. Like I want to stay green, and I've improved so much just within the past month. We had that risk management
Mm-hmm.
seminar or webinar,
Yep.
and the Venn diagram with, is it Artie that did the
Yep.
webinar?
Yep.
Yeah, he had the Venn diagram of over trading and then not cutting your losses,
Right.
and then the center of the Venn I don't know. Well, you can't see it.
Yep. There you go. I
Yeah,
can see that. So over trading, not cutting losses, and going broke is the
yeah.
midpoint.
If that's what happens, you're gonna go broke.
Yeah.
And I keep it on my keyboard
There you
so I
go.
can see it while I'm actually trading. And I don't know, it made perfect sense to me. Just because you keep digging in, it's you're just making it worse. So
The,
I've truly cut down on the amount of trading I do, um, and right now I'm really only looking at orbs and then reversals, because I mean that makes sense, having something first thing in the morning and then
sure.
waiting for the runners to turn around.
Those reminders are good, I think, to have there, because it provides a little reminder, and changing them up occasionally, because I find sometimes they get stale. It's sort of like having I don't know. I always like to say it's like the pile of clothes at the bottom of the stairs. And you realize 2 weeks later you've been stepping over it for like 2 weeks. You're like, what? Like it became invisible to you. So you got to change them up so they keep being there. I've got this sign on my desk my son made for me because I'm an under trader. It says "Take the damn trade." It's a nice hard sign I can hit myself with when I don't do it. But those reminders are good. So
I'll give you some of my trades, but
yeah.
I'm only day trading in sim, until I get a hold of some of this psychology stuff. I won't trade until I'm a bit more confident.
Well, that's good. And I like to hear that. So right now you're only in sim for your day trading. Obviously, you're
Right.
swing trading live, and you're
Right.
continuing to do that with real money. But that's good, because at least you've got that comfort and confidence from the swing trading that'll continue to bring not only profits, but that trading experience. And then you're carefully practicing the day trading.
Yeah,
I,
and day trading is difficult. Like I'm pretty risk averse, and I mean, you can have a really awful day,
yeah,
and again, this is all funny money, and it's still, if I do bad, even in sim, I have a tendency to kind of beat myself up about it.
yeah,
So I've got to figure these things out. And again, like limiting the strategies that I'm trading
Right.
and the amount that I'm trading has helped a ton, a ton.
Well, and it leads me to asking about the psychology of trading, because we all have sort of tendencies that we fall into. But in your case, I mean, you changed industries so much, and to something where you would, fly around, you'd interact with people, as you said, maybe too much, 30 people
Yeah.
crammed into a hotel room.
Right.
How have you found it being, I mean, this is a very isolating activity at times, and it's certainly a solo activity. How have you found it sort of working at home on your own all day?
So even though in production you are around a lot of people, and I love everybody that I worked with. I've worked with so many great people, met a lot of great people. But truly, at the end of a production, I would just go home. I was exhausted. Like it's people truly would take a lot out of me because I'm giving all
People
day.
exhaust me.
I'm like borderline introvert extrovert.
Right.
But definitely after jobs, I always called it a production hangover, and
Mm,
I tell Jeff like, I just I just can't answer any more questions. I don't care what we eat, what we do, just don't ask me to
right.
answer a question. So it's been kind of nice being it, the best part has been finding the chat room. So there is interaction there. I think if it was only me
Right.
in front of the computer, I would not be happy. And then the ladies Slack group is amazing. There's so many amazing ladies in there, and yeah, they're pretty funny and always learn things from them. I'm always amazed at how many have they're ladies with full-time jobs, kids, or both
Right.
that are still trading, and they're very inspiring.
And I think that that's great. I mean, obviously we have the main chat room at Bearable Traders that we use, and I love it. I find it's like it's a social outlet as well, right? Because
Yeah.
like everybody, we're sitting here at home, and that's an opportunity to interact and actually talk with people, even if it's just through text. I get the advantage of being on a microphone and ramble at people all day, but it's great. But I love the fact that we have that, as you said, that Slack channel where the ladies specifically, and it was because we were finding that there was a desire for some of the women traders to have a conversation that was, specific to what they were going through and their experiences, and you found that valuable to be part of.
Absolutely.
Great.
Absolutely. I feel like we kind of get a little more, I mean, I would say personable
Mm,
in there. There's an accountability group. So if we have traded like a complete schmuck that day, we'll just say it. Um, at one point in the group, I just felt like almost every day I was only saying something negative, and I was like, every negative thing I say, I'm gonna have to say something positive about myself because it's getting to me a little bit. But yeah, there are different headers in the Slack group, so we can post anything from accountability, and we may have a Bitcoin channel now. Um, Swing trading, there are all different conversations within there, and there's always something silly and fun
yeah.
going on. So
I love the fact that it exists and then it's so heavily used here because trading is truly an egalitarian activity, right? It doesn't matter your background, your social status, your gender, like none of it matters. The markets don't care. The markets will take your money just the same, right? um, and it's
money has no gender.
yeah, exactly. And it's funny how traditionally we've seen, Wall Street and a lot of that big money sort of as a male-dominated industry, and there's really no justification for it. I love the fact that our modern technology has opened the ability for not only us as common, we're considered retail traders and dumb money normally, but I think we're getting a lot smarter as a group. But it also has leveled the playing field such that we can sort of demonstrate, you know what, I mean, we can do it on our own terms, no matter who you are and what your background is. Obviously, there's some priced entry. You have to have the cash to be able to trade, but even that has come down over the last few years. So it's good to see that that's happening, and you're able to take advantage of it. So a lot of good side I hear coming. Any downside you found maybe from the psychology or the management that you've experienced in trading? You mentioned a little bit of impulsiveness
Oh yeah.
so do you find that hard to manage again on your like? Do you find yourself sometimes you go and you take it and you're like, what did I just do?
Yeah, I
Where?
have several trades. Like I have trade review to track all of my trades, and there's several where I've gone in and then immediately I've gone out and I was like, oh well, I corrected myself. Like I'm slowly realizing like whenever I jump in. But again, I've gotten so much better. I think March was the month where, because that was after my journey down pivot, all of the into the pivot rabbit hole.
Yeah.
So March, I was just kind of searching and trying to find the next, what I needed to do next. And that was probably the most frustrating thing, is not like I don't have a mentor. I don't have somebody to push me in a
Right.
direction. Like if they know me and they know my personality, they could possibly suggest another strategy to use. So I felt like March, I was just running around out there trying to figure out what would really work, and then reading as much as I could. Like I said, rereading some of the older books that I had, and just searching. So I have improved. I've gotten better, but yeah, I mean, I still feel like there's maybe one or two trades a week that I will just fight. I'll get in and fight, and it makes no sense, but it still happens. But
Yeah, they say there's no value in arguing with the market, right?
yeah,
And that leads to something that you'd actually mentioned to me earlier. You made a great analogy about dealing with customers and applying that knowledge here into the markets. Talking about the customer's always right, and saying you
right,
had to sort of realize in this case the market is always right. Sometimes
right.
it's not worth fighting it. Maybe you can expand on that.
So at least for me, dealing with clients, like you may have a conversation where you have a differing view, but you never fight with them if there's something that's going against their like the project objective. You don't go up against them and argue and fight and push back. You accept it, and you move on and you do the work so you can get your paycheck. So I've tried to change my relationship with the market and think of the market as my client, and the client's always right. Just get in there, do the work, get your money, and then go. Just don't try to fight it. And that's a kind of simple shift, but that's helped
No,
me change my perspective.
I love that perspective because it just shows, it doesn't matter what industry you're coming from, you can apply some of those life lessons or learnings to trading. And I like how you've turned that and said, yeah, like, why would I fight with it? Like, as much as you may want to argue with your client and they could be wrong. And it's sometimes like, I can tell you, I think that the market is wrong, but it doesn't matter if I think it's wrong. It's still going to do what it's going to do.
Right,
Right? I can stare at GameStop all day and tell you I don't think it's worth $160, but it's not changing because I think it's overvalued.
right. This makes absolutely no sense why you want to do XYZ,
Yeah,
but
right.
it doesn't matter what I think. Like,
Yeah.
yes,
But
darling, whatever you want. You
you've got a
just
good perspective and taking that lesson and saying, all right, well, I won't argue with the market. I'll just figure out how to work with it. And as you said, get
right.
your paycheck. And at the end of the day, sort of go home.
Live
So,
to work another day.
yeah, exactly. Wow, that's great. So, any advice you'd have for people getting into trading? I mean, because you've had such a different journey. You obviously self-taught from reading the books you started with something you were comfortable in swing trading. Sorry, moving into, well, now trying anyways the day trading. If someone else was coming from an industry that had nothing to do with computers, stocks, or technology, what advice would you give them?
Um, I think I sent you a couple. To pace yourself. I think when I first got into this, I was a little panicked, and I felt like I had to read and ingest all of the information. I was trying to watch all the videos and listen to all of the news feeds and all of the like Twitter personalities that were posting, and it was overload. And at some point, I decided to weed out a lot of the extraneous information. So grading is a marathon, not a sprint. So don't try to do too much all at once. And then learning how to ride the wave that all the markets and sectors and stocks, everything has a ebb and flow, and just trying to get used to things not always going your way. It may be down, it may be up, and just learn to get comfortable riding the wave. And that's also something that was very true with production. Like we would be really, really busy or pretty slow. So you had to learn how to ride the wave in between the jobs. And then staying nimble, learning how to adjust your rules as the market adjusts.
I think those are great pieces of advice for anybody starting. We all tend to try and absorb too much too fast and end up confusing ourselves. So you're right. There's no, there's no need to try and do it all at once. Take your time. Understand that the market is always changing, and like you said, riding that wave. That's sort of a good analogy, because again, you know, every wave is slightly different, but they do follow patterns. But you have to be out there for long enough to start to see those broader patterns, and that's important. And therefore adjust your rules as the markets change. So great. Well, look, thank you so much for taking the time, Courtney, to talk with us. We really appreciate it. Good luck on the journey into day trading. I hope it proves as successful as your swing trading has been so far. Yeah, fingers crossed. Fingers crossed.
We'll see.
And we will see you in the Bearables trading room.
And it's vaccination day for me. As soon as I get off of this, I'm headed to go get my first vax.
Fantastic. Well, I understand usually you end up with a sore arm for the first day, and hopefully that's about it. If you're lucky. If not, it might last a little bit longer, but fingers crossed for you.
I'll take it.
All right. All right, Courtney.
Thank you
take
so
care.
Much, Peter. Take care.
Bye-bye.